Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 51 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, I've received a number of emails and phone calls asking where episode 50 is because no one can find it on YouTube. Well, episode 50 was 3 weeks ago, and I'm going to revisit some of the content of episode 50, but the core element of episode 50 was playing out for the first time on the web, Voices from the Gas Fields. But as of 1st of May, I have made that documentary freely available on YouTube. That is the final version. So if you do want to catch the latest and final version of Voices from the Gas Fields, just punch it into your browser and you will find it on YouTube. It's only been up for 3 days. It's had about 3,500 views last time I checked, and hopefully it will continue to go viral. Of course, it shares the message about what we can expect here in the UK if we are not successful in shutting this abomination down. Now, in that programme, I also talked about this news item which had appeared the previous Thursday, and this was published in the Daily Mirror, We've Struck Oil, and it was based upon the announcements given to the media on the previous Thursday evening after the markets had closed by David Lenigas, who is the Chief Executive Officer of UK Oil and Gas Investments, the company who drilled an exploratory well at Horse Hill, just a little to the north of Gatwick Airport. And this was his brag. He said, we've found £450 billion worth of black gold 3,000 feet below Gatwick Airport. Well, those of you who did watch the show live will remember that basically I called David Lenigas out on this and said this was a total scam. He's done it before, and basically he was blagging to simply get the stock price up. And as is always the case, you can always find mug punters. You know, this time next year we'll be millionaires. And David Lenigas pretty much managed to get the stock price of UCOG up from hovering around about a halfpenny, and he took it to about 3 pence. So a 600% leap within the space almost of a few hours. So my observation was that David Lenigas had no clue how much oil or gas was beneath the Weald, because he certainly hadn't taken the core samples and hadn't had enough time to analyse the core samples to make such an outrageous statement that there was more oil and gas beneath the Weald than under the North Sea. Well, interestingly, I'm not suggesting for one moment that the BBC or the alternative investment market watch Fracking Nightmare, but on the Tuesday afternoon, the following day, this was issued by the BBC, the size of UK oil find as yet unproven, which is a rather diplomatic BBC headline, but let me translate it for you. David Lenigas, you're full of... You know, the bottom line is that you were rumbled. The alternative investment market rumbled you, and they asked for clarification, which of course is also a euphemism for we think you're talking a crock. Well, of course, you've gone very, very silent since then, but it would seem that there are still some mug punters out there, because the stock price is actually hovering, or right now it's actually just over 2.5 pence. So that's still, you know, 160 odd % above what it was on the Thursday afternoon before you made your outrageous statement. So I'm sorry for all those mug punters who threw money at David Lenigas's company. It's probably the same mug punters that threw their money at Andrew Austin's iGas after he made a similar announcement in 2013. And he managed to lift the stock price up above £1.40, and the iGas stock price is now under 30 pence. So The reality is that the unconventional gas industry in the UK is absolutely desperate for David Cameron to get back into office. Because David Cameron will, of course, brag that he was elected with a mandate to exploit unconventional hydrocarbons. But the reality is that the growing movements around the UK, the 300 plus groups that have done their research, are absolutely determined to ensure that this industry, this abomination, does not get a foothold in this country. And whomever is your MP after Thursday's election, I would encourage you to gift them a copy of Voices from the Gas Fields. In fact, somebody already suggested that maybe I should do some crowdfunding to raise some money to ensure that every MP gets a copy. But let's see how that unfolds on Thursday. Now, I'm just going to make an observation that I've been making through my Apathy Kills events over the past 2 months or so, and made earlier on Humanity versus Insanity tonight. There are many people who have stated that they have no intention of voting on Thursday. Well, let me simply make the observation that if you do not vote on Thursday, you will be doing precisely what the establishment wants you to do. So let me just explain that a second. The establishment are very well aware that those people who are capable of independent critical analysis are most unlikely to vote for the establishment parties. So therefore, they would rather that you didn't vote at all. Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that they're not capable of manipulation. We know they are. And in fact, David Cameron made it very clear when he was interviewed by Andrew Marr 3 weeks ago that postal votes would be used for manipulation. He didn't quite say it in so many words. What he said was that in a few days, 7 million people will cast their postal votes. Now, 7 million people is 1 in 7 of the electorate. In fact, in the last election, barely 30 million people voted. So, 1 in 7 would be about 20% of the electorate, 1 in 5 people. I don't think so. So if there are that many postal votes cast, then one can only conject that there are ballot boxes stuffed, ready to go in some of the marginal constituencies where the establishment wants to make sure that the right person gets re-elected. So if you are thinking of not voting, I would seriously ask you to reconsider. Who you vote for is entirely up to you. But everything that's unfolding right now is unfolding because we, the collective we, let it. And that includes allowing the unconventional gas industry to get a foothold. Fortunately, to date, we've managed to prevent that. And there are an increasing number of people around this country who are determined that it stays that way. But it's not over yet. And don't underestimate the capacity and determination of the socio-psychopathic global corporatists. They will do whatever it takes. They will buy whomever they have to buy to get their dirty bits in the ground. So we're going to be hooking up in a few minutes with a candidate from what is quite possibly the most sensitive constituency in the country when it comes to unconventional gas. But before we do that, just take a look at this trailer for my new documentary, Voices from the Gas Fields.
Shale gas is part of the future and we will make it happen.
I'm charged with, without lawful authority or excuse, obstructing the highway. Well, I believe I have lawful excuse.
We're going to take very great care that there is no damage to the water supply.
Gas at Barton Moss contaminated the well site. Then Rathlin Energy were responsible for considerable property damage as a result of their seismic testing.
There is a fishing lake which started to go down immediately following the detonation of these charges.
I think there's a huge amount of myths that are being put round in order to frighten people.
The first person that signed a well was the person that doomed us to this. An unconventional gas well isn't a pipe out of the ground. With it comes all of the drilling and the destruction. That's a hectare. Plus tracks, compressor stations, water holding ponds.
So we're right in the middle of the Australian bush here. Well, it was once bush.
We take a strip literally 520 kilometres for this one company. We sit on the Great Artesian Basin, one of the greatest water resources in the world, and they are allowed to deplete it and turn it to trash.
There used to be a beautiful green lawn with roses in it. 3 nights of rain, it was dead. Each time it rains, it just comes up black.
You're genuinely so scared of what is happening. It's untrustworthy and it's running out.
This is called a high point vent. That'll have everything in it.
The benzene, the toluene, the ethyl benzenes.
Everything.
When your nose is burning, your eyes are burning, and you got that terrible oily sort of taste, I said, you know, the flares are not, they're just venting. Then other times, it's like little fibres in your throat, you know, the flare is on.
The majority of people that have visited us, they say, how can you live there? You know.
So that's the trailer for Voices from the Gas Fields. Now, I mean, although it is my documentary, and it was the initial filming was all funded from my own pocket. In fact, it was the proceeds of a series of talks that I did in Australia last November that enabled me to go and do the filming. But the real credit has to go to Marco Jackson, who I engaged as the editor. And Marco did it as a professional proposition, but he did fortunately give me mates rates, thankfully. But Marco, you have turned out an absolutely stunning and very powerful product, and for that, my friend, I really thank you, and I hope that it helps to get the message out. Now, I'm joined by Bob Dennett, who is the Green Party candidate standing for election on Thursday on the Fylde Peninsula. Good evening, Bob. How are you doing?
Good evening, Ian. I'm fine. How's you?
Oh, good. I know you have a very grueling schedule, particularly in the run-up to Thursday. So thanks for finding the time to join me tonight. Now, I'm just going to bring up on screen the license here. Here we go. This is the license. This is the Petroleum Exploration and Development License, which is owned by Quadrilla. And of course, Quadrilla's claim to fame is that they are the only company to have drilled and fracked a well in the UK. And of course, when they did frack it, we now know that they damaged the casing. We know they knew they damaged the casing and continued to frack. And eventually they fracked into a fault, which was a geological fault, which was not on the geological maps that they were using, because they were using old maps. And it was as a result of the subsequent seismic activity that the moratorium was put in place in this country. But Quadrilla don't give up that easy, do they, Bob?
No, they don't. I would question whether or not they knew that fault was there, because I'm in possession of a report from that was created by some geologists at Durham University that states that induced seismicity is beneficial to the operator.
So in theory, your conjecture is that they may have deliberately fracked into the fault on the basis that that would have enhanced the frack job and opened up the geology and created greater flow.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, because on the environmental impact assessment for the Preston New Road site, they're also going to drill directly through a small fault.
Well, this is very interesting, isn't it? So, because if that is the case, then Quadrilla. I mean, we know that they knew they had damaged the well casing and continued to frack. So, if they knew that they were drilling or fracking into a known fault, that really does have to call into question the the integrity of the company.
I would agree with that, and I think I don't see how they could possibly say that they weren't aware of the other two faults, the two larger faults, the Thistleton fault and the Woodsands fault, that run very, very closely. I mean, a few thousand feet, but they run not far from the Priest Hall 1 site. So I don't believe these people call themselves professionals. If they are professional, then they were aware of those faults. So but then again, they prove that they're not professional by fracking so close to two major faults.
Well, I mean, from my observation, what we've seen so far in the UK is literally a bunch of cowboys. Whether it's Quadrilla, whether it's iGas, or whether it's Rathlin Energy. We've got iGas that contaminated the well site at Barton Moss with polyacrylic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, which is pretty nasty stuff. And of course, they've refused to allow any independent analysis on the well site. So my conjecture there is that they are now waiting for the Manchester rainfall to effectively cleanse the site before they allow any independent analysis. And then we've got Rathlin Energy over in East Yorkshire, who have damaged a whole raft of properties. And in fact, I would argue that the damage caused by Rathlin in their seismic testing is actually greater than the property damage caused by Quadrilla as a result of their fracking into the fault. And yet, in all cases, of course, they are claiming to be, top of the game and only employing the highest level of professionals.
To use an old Royal Navy expression, "Oh, it wasn't me, Chief. It wasn't me, Chief."
Yeah.
I didn't do that.
Well, Connaught Oil and Gas, who are the owners of Rathlin, if Connaught really are a company of integrity, then they will be pulling the plug on Rathlin Energy. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if Rathlin Energy actually is on the brink of bankruptcy. I can't see how a company that is that incompetent can actually remain in operation. But, somehow they do. Meanwhile, of course, I mean, what is interesting with Quadrilla is that Lord John Brown was chairman of the company. He was also the prime mover in terms of getting this industry established, or trying to get it established, when he was appointed to David Cameron's cabinet in June 2010 as his special business advisor. But I gather he has now jumped ship from Quadrilla.
Yes, he's resigned as the chairman of Quadrilla, and he's gone to join. I can't remember the guy's name. But,
it's Letter One, and the guy is Mikhail Friedman.
That's the man. He's gone to join a Russian oligarch in a company called Letter One, where he has. It's rumoured that it's something to the order of $6.5 billion war chest to do whatever he's going to do with it. There was some question of him trying to buy into North Sea gas fields. Not quite sure what's happened with that, because I've been busy with the election campaign in the last couple of months, so I haven't been keeping up to date with things. But I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised to see him filtering back into the UK shale market with that pot of money.
Well, it wouldn't be unknown, that's for sure. I mean, he has put a lot of his own investment company's money into that, his Riverstone Holdings. and I'm sure he's looking to replenish the losses that he's made there. I mean, this is a lovely graphic that I saw recently. Quadrilla, your money down the drain. Well, actually, it's into a black hole, isn't it? And of course, 45% of Quadrilla is held by AJ Lucas. And this is the stock price of AJ Lucas. That's in Australian dollars. And that's 30 cents. That's 30 Australian cents. So the AJ Lucas stock is basically where most of the unconventional gas stocks are right now, which is hovering around the rim of the toilet.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I mean, the Fylde, these socio-psychopaths, they don't give up. You know, regardless of the fact that there is considerable opposition, regardless of the fact that there is increasing awareness of the magnitude of the devastation that this industry causes wherever it manages to get its bits in the ground, they're still pushing ahead. And of course, the Fylde is the premier sacrifice zone. And we saw, of course, Nicholas Soames in Sussex a couple of weeks ago make the observation that, we shouldn't frack in Sussex. We should frack up in the Trough of Bowland where not very many people live.
Yeah, not in my backyard.
Well, exactly.
My own view on this is, obviously I don't want it in my backyard, but I don't want it in your backyard either. I don't want it in Nicholas Soames's backyard. I don't want it in anybody's backyard. And that's part of the reason that I'm running as a parliamentary candidate in the Fylde. Because, as you just rightly said, this is a crucial constituency in the well, I'm going to call it the shale gas war, because that's what it is coming to, between the public and the government and the operators. It's my own view, and one thing I must say here is that everything I'm saying on here is my own view. It's not the Green Party's view. I'm standing as the Green Party candidate in the Fylde because I believe that this is a very crucial constituency in the war on shale gas, and whatever happens here is likely to will set a precedent for the whole of the UK and potentially the whole of Europe. And the applications that Quadrilla have currently got going through the process with Lancashire County Council state that they are for exploration works. But in actual fact, if you read the environmental impact assessment, they're also talking about doing extended flow testing for a period of 2 years directly into the grid. Well, I don't believe that any company that has expended something close to £200 million over the last 3-4 years and not produced any results for it is going to let their first year's gas go down the drain without getting some payment for it. And from my own opinion is that qualifies as production under the guise of flow testing.
Absolutely. And let's also make it very clear that you cannot flow test unconventional geology without fracking, period.
Absolutely.
So it's self-evident here that Quadrilla are determined to do whatever it takes to get their wells established. Now, there is one permission that's been granted literally in the last few days, I believe, Bob.
Yes, they've... it wasn't actually granted. It was granted last September. The planning meeting at which the Beaconsall site was heard was granted last September, but there was something wrong in the wording or something wrong in the conditions. I'm not quite sure exactly what the problem was because it's not in my area. It's the guys from south of the river that have been dealing with that. But the local authority finally agreed that it could go ahead, and they've released a notice to that effect on Friday. So that kind of limits the timescales now that Quadrilla have got to get into that, get back to that well and to flow test. And I know they weren't there today because I was on the site today, or I was at the site today. So they're going to have to start work tomorrow, and well, possibly tomorrow, and they've got a couple of weeks to start the preparation work on there to do some pressure testing, not flow testing, pressure testing. So they're going to puncture the casing, and then they're going to put some pressure monitoring equipment into the wellbore, and they have to have that completed by the 30th of September, because that's when the migrating geese come back.
And then the other application that was deferred from January 28th, that's Preston New Road and Rossiter. And that was, I believe, deferred up until 30th of June.
Well, whether it's deferred until the 30th of June is questionable. I think the phrasing was by the 30th of June. And if we look at the current schedule for Planning Development Committee meetings in Lancashire County Council, my own view is the next scheduled one is the 20th of May. So the one that would follow that would be somewhere around the 21st or 23rd of June, if they run to the normal schedule, you know, a month at a time.
And this is, of course, really the deferment that Quadrilla were looking for when they realised that the level of opposition and objection and the quality of the objections being raised by individuals and local groups at the LCC, Lancashire County Council hearing, were effectively probably going to ensure they didn't get the application they submitted. So they requested the deferment. In fact, they submitted the request for deferment, I think, at 4 o'clock on the Friday afternoon, wasn't it?
No, it was earlier than that, because I heard about it at about 3:15. So I'm guessing that they must have
after lunch.
They must have done it just after lunch, and we were all sat in the hearing, waiting to do presentations, listening to the presentations that were being made, and waiting to do our own presentations, and it was closed down.
And then basically the council said they would reconsider or they would consider the deferment the following Tuesday. And then there was some concern within the planning committee that there was external pressure being applied to grant the deferment.
I couldn't comment on that because I'm not sure about that. But my own view is that it's a lot of playing politics. And I think possibly the reason for the most recent deferment to by the 30th of June might have something to do with the infrastructure bill. The infrastructure bill will be ratified in July, I believe. So to leave the planning application until the end of June gives time for whoever the new government is going to be to get settled in, put the right people in place, under pressure from the corporate lobbyists of the oil and gas industry, of course, to put the right person in place as the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, because ultimately I believe that's the person that's going to make that decision.
Yeah, and sadly, of course, the other factor that needs to be acknowledged is that the Infrastructure Act now includes a political definition of a hydraulic fracture.
Yes.
So if a single stage uses less than 10,000 cubic meters of fluids, that's about 220,000 gallons, bar a few pints, then it's not considered to be a hydraulic fracture. And if the total operation uses less than 2 million gallons of fluid, sorry, 200,000, is it? No, it's 200,000. 10,000 cubic meters.
10,000 cubic meters.
10,000 cubic meters
is around the 2 million gallons.
It's 2.2 million gallons, exactly. Yeah. So these are the new political definitions. So basically, what occurred at Priest Hall in 2011 under the new definitions wasn't a hydraulic fracture. No, that's not true. I did some research into converting cubic meters to gallons. And the number of, I looked at the capacity of local reservoirs. That's what I was researching. The capacity of the local reservoirs, how much water would be used per frac.
And on the Quadrilla's site at that time, it said that they had used 12,000 cubic meters. That is just short of 2.7 million gallons of water.
So that is over the edge, yeah, that's over the top.
That's on a vertical bore, not on a horizontal. So on a horizontal bore, there would be a lot more, because obviously they've got further to travel with the water. There's much more capacity in the borehole for the water. I challenged one of Quadrilla's directors on this at a public meeting in Freckleton, because he was trying to hoodwink a member of the public into believing that they used very little water. And she asked him to convert cubic meters to gallons. He said he couldn't do it. I said, well, that's strange, because I can. So I did. And he said, where did you get that figure from? I said, I got it from your website. And the guy sat next to him said, yes, that's what it says on our website. 12,000 cubic meters. 2 weeks later, they changed it to 8,540 cubic meters.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
unfortunately, I didn't get a screenshot of it.
Yeah, that's a pity. So that was actually an admission by Quadrilla. Was that Mark Miller, by the way?
No, it was Leon Jennings.
Okay, well,
and there were 3 other witnesses with me.
Okay, but dear old Leon doesn't understand jack about the process. I mean, sadly, Leon's a nice guy, but Leon's way out of his depth. Yeah. I mean, Leon has never been involved in any hydraulic fracture operation at all. Everything that Leon knows, basically, he's been told by Mark Miller. And Mark Miller, of course, will simply tell Leon what he wants Leon to know. That's how absurd it is, having somebody responsible for health and safety who basically has no background in the industry whatsoever. Sad, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it is, really.
Yeah.
But like we said earlier on, or as you said earlier on, this is something we've got to stop. And I'll come to my stock phrase, which is, it started here in the Fylde. We will end it here in the Fylde.
Now, you've been involved, Bob, in this campaign. I mean, certainly for as long as I can remember. I mean, I don't remember whether you were actually at my very first Fractured Future presentation, which was in St Anne's in February of 2013. I know there were a couple of other people there. You were there, okay?
Yeah.
So that was certainly, I think, where I met you for the first time. And I know that obviously you'd been involved in opposing this industry basically since the seismic events in 2011.
Well, I've been involved in researching it since the seismic event, because within 24 hours, 48 hours of the seismic event, we knew that it was fracking that was going on. We knew there was a gas company here. We knew they were exploring, but we didn't know exactly where they were or what they were doing. Then it came to light that it was fracking. I was woken up by the earthquake. It scared the crap out of me. So and then I heard it was fracking. So then I started looking into it, because I was already aware of fracking. I'd seen an American drama, one of these CSI things, where they were talking about fracking, and I'd seen that maybe 2 or 3 years before. In fact, probably a bit longer than that, in the early noughties. So I did some research, but I was busy with my life at the time, just like the rest of the population are. I was struggling to survive and, working ridiculous hours. But then that eased off towards the end of the year. And a local businessman who was throwing his dummy out of the pram about a refusal of planning permission put a shiny, glossy brochure through my door that said that if he didn't get his planning permission for that piece of land in Ray Green, he was going to put a Quadrilla fracking site on it. Well, I hadn't been absolutely certain, again, because I was too busy, of exactly where that proposed site was. But his brochure had a map on it. And it was no more than 300 yards from my back door. And purely by coincidence, I was in Lytham the same night. I went into a shop. There's a poster on the wall that says, if you disagree with fracking, ring this number. So I rang that number, and I got involved with Residents' Action on Fylde Fracking. And that was at the beginning of 2012. So, yeah, I was involved to a degree from the seismic events, but I actually got involved in the protest movement at the beginning of 2012.
And then you were raising awareness on the Fylde. And then when the Balkan campaign kicked off in July of 2013, I mean, you were there, I mean, if not every weekend, you were certainly there many weekends throughout the Balkan campaign.
Yes, you're right.
And you also were a regular visitor to Barton Moss. And in fact, it was thanks to you that we had the hog roast on, I think it was Christmas Eve.
Yeah, it was.
I remember that
Christmas
very well. I think it was the best I'd eaten in quite a few weeks. It was a bit of a respite from Thugs R Us, the tactical aid unit of the Greater Manchester Police. So a bit of a respite, and yeah, you brought over your hog roast and treated us all to a bit of a feast there. And
I thought it was the least I could do because I don't have the stamina to camp out in that kind of weather. And I thought you guys deserved at least one decent warm meal before Christmas.
Well, it was fantastic, and then and as I know you're aware, the local residents stepped up to the plate, and we had a fantastic Christmas lunch.
Yeah.
Cooked by the residents of Earlham and Caddishead, and again, that's testimony to all the support that the anti-fracking community and the protection community have from the local populace. So you've been right out there on point. And at what point did you decide that you were going to stand for parliamentary election?
Before I actually joined the protest movement, in fact, I was aware that the local our local MP wasn't doing anything about fracking. I was reading reports in the press, hearing what other people have got to say, and I thought, well, somebody needs to stand against this guy, and I'm now in a position where I can do it because I had ceased work. I'd retired, and I thought, right, I can now devote some time to that, and I declared my interest to stand to a small group of family and friends, and then when I joined the protest movement in 2012, I declared it to them also. It frightened me a bit at the time, actually, because I thought, you need a big profile to do this, and I haven't got one. But it kind of happened organically through being part of the anti-fracking movement. I've been fighting fracking almost full time for 3.5 years at very, very severe financial cost to myself. But I won't stop because I've got 10 grandchildren in this area, and it's their future, not mine. I've had most of my life, and I don't want to. I don't want to go to my grave knowing that my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren are going to be living in an industrialized gas field. So I will continue to fight this, and that's so I eventually joined the Green Party, and that more or less that galvanised that I was going to stand for Parliament, and I've been steadfast ever since I first declared it, and now that's exactly what I'm doing. In another 3 days, who knows what will happen? I'm not over optimistic about winning, but my goal has always been to do enough damage to the incumbent MP's majority to make this a marginal seat, or as close to a marginal seat as I can, because I think they've been taking it for granted that they're always going to get in here, because if you put a monkey in a blue tie and stood them up for Parliament here, and these aren't my words, these are other people's words, that people would vote for them.
Well, there is an argument that actually says that's precisely what the Tories did, of course, when they put the current incumbent up. But yeah, that's just what I've heard. So yeah, Mark Menzies has apparently been somewhat invisible over the last few weeks, but I gather this is a tactic that's being adopted by a number of incumbent Tory MPs. They're working on the basis that it's theirs to lose rather than theirs to win. Mm-hmm. Now, as you rightly say, Menzies has basically always been pro-fracking. He was, of course, instructed, I believe, to vote for the amendments to the recent infrastructure act. But I mean, it was just a simple sacrifice because they could afford. They knew it wasn't going to get passed. So it's like, Mark,
right.
you know, just vote for it so that you can go back and tell those, you know, mug punters up in the Fylde that, you know, you've changed your mind and you're anti-fracking. But I mean, look, I've done my research, Bob, and I've looked at all the candidates on the Fylde, in the Fylde constituency. And I mean, there is one that jumps to mind. That's Jed Sullivan, who has stated as the Labour Party candidate that he is anti-fracking. But, you know, my observation would be Barbara Keeley, who is the Labour MP for Earlham and Cadishead, has been absolutely consistent in her opposition as a Labour MP to fracking in her constituency. But it doesn't matter a damn, because her party is pro-fracking. And in fact, I've got to tell you this, I heard a little anecdote today. There was a Green Party candidate who was invited onto Ed Miliband's campaign bus and asked Ed Miliband to change his party's policy on fracking. And he actually had to turn to an aide and say, what's our policy on fracking again? And he was told, we're pro. So, you know, that's how much of an issue it is for him. So the Labour Party, even though they've got individual MPs that are stating that they're anti the unconventional gas agenda, their party is clearly pro. So it's my observation that you are the only anti-fracking candidate on the Fylde. And of course, the Green Party are the only party that has stated categorically in its manifesto that it is against the establishment of an unconventional gas agenda in this country.
Yeah, the Green Party, the only major party, there are a couple of very small ones that have said that they are absolutely anti-fracking. But the Green Party is the only major party, and we are now the fourth largest, if you include the SNP, we're the fourth largest political party in the UK. We've got more members than UKIP, we've got more members than the Lib Dems. In fact, I haven't looked at the Lib Dem and UKIP figures recently, but I would say we're very, very close to having more members than both of them put together. So that makes us a major party in the UK, and therefore we are the only major party to have a policy that is to ban fracking. Not to put a moratorium in place, not to pussyfoot around talking about if it's tightly regulated or if it's properly regulated and enforced. We know, you and I know, that this industry cannot be regulated to make it safe. There is no way this industry can ever be safe because we're relying on an inch of cement to protect our water, to protect our soil, and to protect our air.
Well, if anybody thinks it can be regulated, they absolutely need to see voices from the gas fields because, you know, Queensland brags that it has an unconventional gas industry that is very tightly regulated. There's some 12,000 gas wells have been drilled in southern Queensland in the last 9 years, and they have just two people responsible for ensuring that the industry's carries out its operations according to regulation. The reality is, of course, they know it won't, which is why they only put two people in charge of it, so that you know, they can basically just cover it up. You're absolutely right, Bob. This is an industry that cannot be regulated, period.
Well, I will carry on, whether or not I'm elected. I mean, my anti-fracking credentials are not in question. My anti-fracking credentials are absolutely pure, clean. You know, I've devoted my life to it, and I will continue to do so, whether or not I am elected. I am the only anti-fracking candidate on the Fylde. You referred to Barbara Keeley earlier on. I actually had a bit of a tiff with Barbara Keeley about why she had abstained, because she maintains to be anti-fracking, and she said she abstained because they couldn't have won the vote. And I said, well, if you hadn't have done a deal with the Tories, then maybe you could have made a difference. And it would certainly have sent a message to your constituents. So now her constituents don't trust her because she abstained. I was there. I was in the House of Commons when that vote took place. And I was looking to see who did or did not abstain.
Well, sadly, politics is a very dirty business.
Yes, you're right. And I don't see how, bless him, Jed, I get on very well with Jed. I don't see how, if Jed is elected, how he will be in any better position than Barbara Keeley. If they don't follow the party whip, the whip will be removed and they can't have any effect whatsoever in Parliament for a period of time. Whereas, again, the Green Party, we don't work to a whip, certainly not at the moment. And we're against fracking anyway.
No, absolutely. And, I mean, far be it for me to encourage anybody to vote in any particular way. That's not the way I operate. But in this election, you know, it is undeniable that there is only one party that is determined to shut down unconventional gas in this country. And my observation would be that the primary reason that the Green Party has had such a massive surge in membership is related almost entirely to its stance on unconventional gas. But I do have to say, Bob, in the interests of balance, I must confess to being rather surprised, even a little disappointed perhaps, that Natalie Bennett appears not to have made more of her stance, or the Green Party's stance, on unconventional gas. And there's another factor here as well, by the way, that maybe many people are not aware of, is that the Green Party is also the only party to have included in its manifesto a quest for monetary reform.
That's absolutely right.
And I mean, unfortunately, I'm not going to go down that particular route tonight because, unfortunately, it's been a bit of how should I say, a bit of an Achilles heel for them, because what's become very clear is that, sadly, a lot of the Green Party candidates do not have sufficient comprehension of the fractional reserve system and the debt-based economy, and so they're unfortunately being caught on it when it's come up in the hustings. But nonetheless, I mean, full credit to the Green Party for recognising that the root of all ills in this country is the banking system. And until such time as we get back to, you know, government being responsible for the issuance of currency and taking it away from private bankers, sadly, the economic situation is not going to get any better. But that's not the subject of tonight's discussion. We are focusing on the unconventional gas agenda. So, Bob, if you don't get the result that you hope for, what's your plans after May 7th?
Well, if I'm not elected, then I will continue I will continue with the fight against fracking. If there is a second election this year, which there has been speculation that there could possibly be,
I think there will be,
then I will also fight that election. By which time, of course, because of this election, because the Green Party are now in a position, because of the surge, or partly because of the surge, now in a position to put candidates in approximately 90% of the seats, then the public will start to see us as a serious contender in the political arena in the UK. So if there is a second election this year, then I think we would stand a huge chance of getting some power in government, or some influence in government.
I think there's a good possibility. I agree with you. I think there will be a second election. I don't think there's going to be a clear majority in the coming election. Sadly, I also think we are in for a summer of contrived unrest.
Yes,
I think that there is going to be an attempt to instigate riots in many of the cities. I think there's also the possibility that the emergency legislation or emergency measures that will be introduced will also be applied, or they will try to apply it, to the protection communities that will spring up around any well site where the industry tries to get itself established. So I think we're in for a rather unsettling few months. I think there will be a second election in the autumn. And of course, the challenge really now is for people within the communities to get involved. I mean, now is not the time to be apathetic or just to descend into willful ignorance. People have to take a very real interest. There are so many issues that people can pick up on right now. And it is, I have to say, the Green Party, whilst I may question some elements of their manifesto, ultimately, if you want to bring about change, you've got to take a bit of a punt. And this is an opportunity like never before. So, we know whether if it's a Cameron and Osborne coalition with UKIP or the Lib Dems or even Labour, basically, you know exactly what to expect. More of the same. More austerity, the continued privatisation of things like the NHS and probably even the police. So, ultimately, on the Fylde, there's only one anti-fracking candidate, and basically there's only one party that's putting forward a manifesto that shows any determination to change the current direction. So, Bob, I wish you every success on Thursday. I'm just going to make a passing observation. I am deeply disturbed by much of what I have seen transpire on the Fylde. I think you have maintained your integrity all the way through this, despite the fact that you, and this is my observation, have been stabbed in the back by those people who should have been your natural allies. Those who use the rallying call of "Unite, we win," I think may have a lot to answer for after May the 7th, because some of those individuals have been the prime perpetrators of division in what is literally the most sensitive constituency, with regard to this agenda anyway, in the country. So, Bob, I wish you well.
Thanks, Ian.
And thanks very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay, my friend, take care. Okay, we're going to take a short break and I'll be back with you after this.
So I've been watching and 9/11 was just an incredible mind control event. It was apparent to me then, as it is today, that people are literally mind controlled, that they're not actually thinking for themselves. Most of us are simply regurgitating.
We live in a bubble, and a lot of times, until you remove yourself from that bubble, you don't even know you're living in a bubble, in a kind of an information prison in the West.
But these guys have got a lot of money, and we complain about McDonald's and all that sort of thing. Do you know why they've got so much money? Because we fucking buy their shit. So it's time to stop it. People say to me, where do we go? What's the first step? Stop supporting the companies that don't give a shit.
Be who you are. Don't police your thoughts and don't police your expression. Express yourself, but work for something positive. Express yourself in a positive way, Create a better world because you're in it. Now, what is your legacy that you leave behind? Is the world better because you were here? Or is it worse because you were here? Or did you just not participate? Because you have to participate, you really do.
And welcome back to the final part of episode 51 of Fracking Nightmare. Okay, that was Bob Dennett. Now, Bob Dennett is indeed the only anti-fracking candidate, parliamentary candidate, standing in the Fylde, despite the fact that there is another individual who, through his duplicity, has continued to try and claim that he is anti-fracking when everything in the public domain would actually indicate that he is pro-regulated fracking. In fact, to be fair to him, he has never put anything in the public domain that would suggest that he is anything other than pro-regulated fracking. And I'm referring to this gentleman here. You can see on the screenshot here, this is Mike Hill. And this is a screenshot from a spoof Twitter account, which you can find at Hill__MP. That's @Hill__MP. And whomever it is that is putting this spoof Twitter account together is really quite astute, because they are picking up on many of the, how shall I say, economies with the truth that this particular candidate seems very comfortable to perpetrate. Now, this individual accused me and another quite prominent anti-fracking campaigner of being on a witch hunt. But Mike Hill seems to forget that when you put yourself up for public office, you open yourself to scrutiny. But Mike Hill seems to whinge like a little girl anytime that anybody questions any statement that he puts out, or indeed his integrity. Well, I'm going to leave you this evening with some questions, because I put these questions into the public domain a few weeks ago, and there has not been any response. Now, there may be a very innocent explanation, but I think that the voters on the Fylde deserve that explanation. So let me just draw your attention here to this page here. What you see on the screen here is from the Company Check website, which provides the financial information of all registered companies in the UK. Now, this is a company known as Gemini Controls and Automation, and the director of that company is, the owner of that company effectively, is Mike Hill. Now, this is a company that had effectively lain dormant for best part of about 8 years. This is information that is freely available. It's in the public domain. Just simply search for Company Check and then Gemini Controls and Automation. And what you can see here is that this company, Gemini Controls and Automation, which lay moribund for best part of 8 years, suddenly seemed to generate some very, very significant revenues just about the time that Mike Hill became prominent in his campaign for pro-regulated fracking. Now, I'm sure there's a very innocent explanation, but if you look at the website for Gemini Controls and Automation, what you will see is that this website is shut down for refurbishment. And it's been in that state for as long as I can recall. So consequently, it's very clear that these revenues are not being generated through any web business. So ask the question. You know, this is a company that is sitting on, you know, some very, very healthy cash. It's sitting on some pretty nice assets. Makes my assets of a caravan look pretty paltry. Hey, listen, I certainly encourage the entrepreneur. But I think in the interests of public scrutiny and the Fylde electorate needing to know exactly the integrity of their parliamentary candidates, then an individual that has been duplicitous for the past few months, where he has tried to, in my opinion, deceive people into believing that he has somehow become an anti-fracker, when everything about this individual is that he is pro-regulated fracking. Sadly, his participation in the Fylde campaign has split the anti-fracking community. And this will most probably result in Mark Menzies being returned to Parliament on Thursday with a larger majority than that which he achieved in 2010. This, of course, will be lauded by David Cameron as a clear mandate from the Fylde electorate that the electorate are pro-fracking, because that is what Mark Menzies is standing for. So if you are pro-regulated fracking, which, if you want to see how fracking can be regulated, look no further than Voices from the Gas Fields, which you will find on YouTube. Remember, the only anti-fracking candidate on the Fylde Peninsula was my guest tonight, Bob Dennett. Friday, the 8th of May, we'll know the outcome. Sadly, from that point forward, then I think that the political high ground will have been lost in the Fylde, and all we're going to be left with is boots on the ground. Thanks for joining me tonight. By next Monday, we'll know the outcome of the election. Sadly, I think it's not going to be an overall majority, and as I've said earlier, unfortunately, we're probably looking at a summer of some pretty serious discontent. Time to get involved. Time for everyone in every community to start taking an interest and shut down the socio-psychopathic corporate agenda that is unfolding in this country. Thanks very much for joining me. I'll see you next week.